Go, hey everybody. I've got Marcus with Marcus. How you doing, Marcus?
I'm good, Marcus.
Yeah, man.
Doing well.
Good, good. And you're typically out west, but you're not quite as far west as you typically are. What's been going on this week?
Yeah, so I'm usually in the North Bay area in Sonoma. That's where I live permanently, but my wife and our two dogs were out in Park City, Utah. We're house sitting for some friends, so we've got quite an adjustment period. We've been out here for about a week, and if anyone's familiar with Park City, we're sort of behind the Deer Valley Ski Resort and kind of pretty much the backcountry. I mean, it's only 10 minutes from Main Street, but we're out here, so it's been a pretty cool adjustment.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And originally or typically out in the LA area.
No, so I was born in the Bay Area. I was born
That's
in
right.
Fremont, California. I grew up in kind of the base of the Sierras in Placerville, and went to school at Santa Clara University. And I pretty much have been in the Bay Area for the last 10 years, lived in San Francisco for a long time. And then 2 years ago, we moved to Sonoma, which is about an hour from San Francisco.
That's
It's in wine country, kind of next to Napa.
that's right. That's right. And how'd you get into following the youth national team? Like what drew you to that specific area?
Yeah, so I mean, it started uh, a with me following the senior team. And I'd say that really started when I went to college. I had really almost zero soccer influence growing up. So my parents and the sports that I was around and that I played were kind of the more popular sports in America in terms of I played basketball and football in high school. I played a lot of baseball growing up. Those were the sports my family was really into. So I really didn't have a ton of like soccer influence at the beginning of my life. And then it was really when I went to Santa Clara, where one, it's a big soccer school. Both men's and women's programs are pretty strong. And so a lot of even kids that go there played and loved the sport. And so a lot of the friends I made while I was there were really into soccer, and that kind of just started my interest. And then it just happened to be that my freshman year in the dorms, I'm going to age myself a little bit, but that was when the 2006 World Cup was. So I just got really into following the team and getting to know the players. And that's really where it started. But I'd say that I was pretty much like what you'd call a casual fan up until uh, really like last year, like 2021. And this kind of new wave of really young and exciting players like really got me interested and excited. And I have a bit of a background in scouting in general. I did some like American football scouting for a period of time. And so like just kind of knowing about the next young wave of players and prospects is like always been something I'm interested in. And so kind of started getting to know the senior landscape and really diving in there. And then I realized that there was kind of like there were some people that were really providing good coverage of like youth soccer in the United States, but there still seemed to be kind of a bigger void missing. So I just dove in, and I've just been in kind of this massive uh learning learning journey, and just getting to know like the system, the academy system, the players that aren't here that are abroad, and just started to learn as much as I can about how to evaluate these players. But a lot of it transfers over, and from sport to sport. Obviously you need to know the game and need to know the kind of technical and tactical elements of the game to be able to scout, but um that uh that sort of like framework for scouting players, I think, is kind of transferable from sport to sport.
Sure. Yeah. What before we move to the youth, who was your favorite player back in 2006?
Oh, I mean, I think like uh Clint Dempsey was kind of the player that like caught my eye and was like, Oh, like we've got like, because I kind of like followed global soccer at like the highest levels and kind of saw what great looks like. Um, and Clint to me was like the closest thing that sort of like resembled that. And just, seeing his career in the Premier League, and like I think his just like his confidence and fearlessness, I was like, okay, like we could have some players that are sort of unafraid to compete at the highest level. So he is someone that caught my eye and was kind of like my favorite player as I started to watch.
So is that where you fall in the Dempsey Donovan goat conversation?
I do. I mean, I respect both. Like I am a fan of both, but I think yeah, Clint. I'm a I'm in the Clint camp.
I'm Team Clint. I think for me, yeah, it's he to me encapsulated the potential of us having a greatest player of all time. Like he wasn't there, but he made
Yeah,
me believe that potential was there more than just the accomplishments on the field.
yeah. He also sort of resembled, I think, what we all kind of loved about great American athletes in other sports, just that like confidence, fearlessness. Yeah, that I was just drawn to that. And I think the fact that he, carved out a really great role in Europe, and that, Landon chose a different path, which is fine. But
Sure.
that helps my narrative, at least in terms of why I fall in the Clint camp.
Sure. And you said you mentioned talking about American football scouting. Obviously soccer starts significantly younger. The even the physical attributes underdeveloped. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between scouting in those two sports? Like how much more potential complexities there are, if any, with soccer because they're so young and they haven't grown into their bodies in the way that you might scout a football player.
Yeah, it's a great point. We are the scouting process, especially when it comes to like scouting from the perspective of like being a professional, starts so much younger. And so yeah, you do have that extra complexity of like of evaluating players who are way before their like physical maturity. And so it does make things complex. And I think what it what you must do is remind yourself to be patient, and that like, and this happens in all sports too, like, but it usually with like American football, you have like guys who nobody's paying attention to coming out of high school, and then they hit some crazy late growth spurt, as like a 20-year-old, and now all of a sudden some player at a no-name college is, going the first round of the NFL draft or something. The same happens in soccer. I think you just have to be more aware of like the level of, that you're evaluating, and that to not draw a lot of conclusions early, and to kind of almost keep your prospect pool pretty wide for a lot longer period of time, because there's more time at which a player could develop technically, physically, instinctually. So, so yeah, I think it's more just really looking at comparing players at like where are they against other players in their age level, and then just knowing that any sort of like physical or even technical development can happen, later. Not as much technically, but physically certainly, and it could really change how you view a player. And there might be players we even talk about today that sort of fall into that category.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. I was listening to I met Tom Byer this week. I don't know if you saw he was on 11 Yanks. He's a big believer
Yeah,
in soccer starts at home and the youth soccer development movement and just driving at technical players. It was really intriguing. I know hearing you now and also thinking about Tom's work and the psychology that happens at the technical level when you start so young and how much harder it is to develop later in life. It was fascinating getting to chat with him this week.
super fascinating. I did watch that, and I was really intrigued, and hope that, and that's like the thing about the desire for soccer to be more popular, because of that concept of soccer starting at home. parents, who are just interested in the sport and want to just see if their kid is interested in the sport. Having that mindset and those tools in your tool belt as a parent is like, it was so fascinating to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got 7 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so I'm like right in that sweet spot. My 7-year-old's doing a 3-on-3 tournament this weekend, and the little ones are like just starting to get into soccer. So it's been really fascinating just getting into that book. I've had a lot of youth national team players suggest that book to me. I'm sold. I'm a
Yeah.
believer.
Yeah.
Tom's gonna put something up on Chasing a Cup next week, I think.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Yeah,
He seems pretty legit.
yeah, for sure. Well, you've been writing for Chasing the Cup for a while. You've got this U21, very niche targeted list. Like what was your goals for kind of keeping that list, and why did you pick that specific area? Did you think there was a gap there, or what was your thought process around why you engineered the list the way you thought?
Yeah, well, I think, I think like most people, when you get into the senior national team, you sort of gravitate towards the players that are playing over in Europe because that's where the highest levels of competition are. But I also recognize the importance and value of the domestic league and especially the academy system, because I think that's where one of the areas where MLS has really, started to get things right, and the investment that these clubs are making in the academies and seeing these academies compete with other big academies, seeing our youth teams compete against other big soccer countries. Um, that's what really drew me to like how I wanted to become a fan of the MLS. Like I want to support MLS, and I think our support of the MLS and USL and the domestic leagues is really critical. But I don't have a really strong tie to a club. The closest MLS club to me is San Jose, and I've gone to some games. I like, you know, if it's on, I'm rooting for them, but I'm not a hardcore fan. So the impetus for this list was really, this is how I follow the MLS. This is the value I get out of the MLS. And what I'm excited about is watching our young domestic players play, because we're also seeing that these players are now, if they perform well, if they get an opportunity, they perform well, they're getting chances to go over and play at really big clubs. So I'm really interested in that progression of like following these academy players, seeing them get opportunities in our domestic leagues, and then seeing how that then parlays into opportunities abroad. So to me, the under 20 impact list is about, here's how I'm watching the MLS. So I figure other people might be, and it's a good way to kind of track like who are the guys that, might be getting opportunities soon based on their performance overseas.
No, I agree. For me, I mean, I wanted to support MLS. I've been a DC United fan, and got to see them come up when they were kings of the league, and watch that development. But for me, it really shifted gears when they decided to really focus on being a development league. Like that just made so much logical sense.
Yeah.
When that shift happened, it got me just extremely energized, like wanting to support the league more. Like I really seeing like that holistic vision of how we could become a soccer powerhouse. And your list just culminates that for me. Like it's just exciting to kind of see it, come in biweekly, and this top 50 list that we've been maintaining, and David Kerr and some others helped start.
Yeah.
And for me, I see it, really unifying from the, whatever you want to call them, MLS elitists and the Euro snobs. Like, I think there's a place where we can be excited about both, right? Like, we can be excited about the league as a development league, as
Yeah.
building a soccer nation and building a fan domestically, but also the factory that it could be of producing top European talent. And those guys going on to be Christian Pulisic and top guys at top clubs, Chris Richards and others in the Premier League, that we'll talk about in a bit. But to me, that almost brings together kind of that marriage of both mindsets of like great U.S. soccer and great U.S. soccer players.
I couldn't agree more. I love that idea. And there's been a lot of like discourse about how we bring these two sort of polarized sides together, which it doesn't make a ton of sense to me why there's so much polarization. But I do agree, like where the Venn diagram feels like it overlaps is we can all agree that young American players developing in the MLS at a good level and then getting opportunities abroad is something we all want to see.
That's
So
it. That's it. And
yeah,
I'll plug USL as well. Obviously,
yeah,
my guy,
100%.
Josh here in town, and I think there's just a ton of energy and excitement about the development production. But this segment, focused on MLS. I'll take my bias hat off, and I do support MLS, of course, as well. But like, who are some of the top players, must watch TV from this group that you've been working on over the last couple weeks, months?
Yeah, so how I try to I'm obviously not able to watch all these games. So a lot of how I'm impact or putting together the list is just through statistics. But also the players I like, if I have the time to watch in the MLS that I like to watch because I think they have high potential and I think um, they have futures overseas potentially. We'll start with the Philly kids because they're probably some of the players that we're all most familiar with. But I think so that would be Paxton Aaronson, Jack McGlynn, and Quinn Sullivan. They're the ones getting the most playing time right now, and even more so Jack McGlynn. So I think he's been one of the more fun young players to watch right now, just because he's getting some consistent minutes and he's taking advantage of that. And he's just such an interesting player to watch and a player we don't have a lot like in terms of his technical ability, his passing ability. And so I really enjoy watching him play because he's just a different kind of American player. It's
Sure.
exciting to see us just even be able to develop. I'm a big John Tolkien fan. I think in a position where we don't have a lot of uh, like solidified answers behind Jedi Robinson, I think he's an option. And as a young player that's actually been playing, I think at a pretty good level for the last year and a half. So I was surprised there was not a lot of chatter about him in this transfer window, but that just could be because Red Bulls are having a pretty good season and they want to see that through. So he might be someone in the winter window to look at, but I think he's a really well-rounded player, and I think he's pretty fun to watch.
I think those are two good shouts. Obviously, the Union is getting tons of international attention. I think they're huge potential this year with Brendan at Leeds, Brendan Aronson. You've got
Yep.
Paxton and a nice crop of the next generation that are probably going to draw interest in December, if not sooner. I wonder if we'll hear some noise about some signings that, like Brendan won't come, to fruition until after the MLS season. But maybe they sign, with a Salzburg or somebody like that from that Red Bull network. But those are two great shouts, even as a club, to be finding success in their domestic league, but also
Yeah.
producing European talent and the revenue generating potential that they are.
Yeah. Agree. Generally, two clubs I will watch frequently because of that too, and there are other players that I like to watch on those clubs. So
Doesn't hurt
uh,
when there's like a 5-4 match like the Rapids Red Bull this past
yeah,
weekend either, right?
yeah, that makes it fun.
Yeah.
Um, the two Fire guys I like to watch. I mean, Gaga just got sold to one of the biggest clubs in the world for a lot of money, 10 million plus. I really like Brian Gutierrez that plays pretty frequently for Chicago as well. So I tune into Chicago pretty frequently. Um, Caleb
What
Wiley. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what do you make of Gaga getting sold? I mean, do you think that's kind of a marketing play? You think there's legit interest from Chelsea? You think they, take them and loan them out overseas? What do you think of that sale?
I definitely don't think it's a marketing thing. Um, I don't think you can look around uh professional leagues around the world. There's very few 18-year-old goalkeepers starting and performing pretty well. He had a rough patch in kind of the middle of the season, but he's pulled out of it, which I think is speaks to him pretty strongly. But yeah, I think goalkeeper development and progression when they get an opportunity, especially at a club at Chelsea. Like, does he ever play for Chelsea? I have no idea, but I think they'll have a plan for him, and I think he's gonna probably get loaned. My hope would be that he kind of gets loaned progressively at in better leagues at better clubs, and as he proves himself, he may work himself up to the level of being able to be the starting keeper for Chelsea. Who knows? But you cannot argue with an 18-year-old who's playing, I'd say, average to above average in a pretty solid league. Like that's impressive. That's not happening,
Yeah, and they have Pulisic. Like they don't need the marketing play. You don't need they're not a club that needs to make that move like maybe a low tier German team might do or something like that that's trying to get, some traction. Chelsea's one of the most popular clubs in North America already.
Well, also, I mean, you look at the other clubs that were after him, right? Like
Yeah.
Real Madrid, like we're not, these are not clubs that are messing around. So
Exactly. I
I,
agree. I agree. I don't think that was a marketing play at all.
no,
Yeah.
I think that narrative in general is a bit silly.
I agree.
Um, so and to just some other, I'll just kind of rapid fire some guys
Yeah.
I kind of keep an eye out for to watch. Caleb Wiley with Atlanta, who's another left back or kind of left wing back is what he plays. I've been super, super impressed with Caden Pierre's progression this year, and he's a right back for Sporting KC, and he's kind of splitting time starting with Zuzi, but playing more frequently. And I can see why he's developing nicely. Not really an example of like someone who I think has physically developed recently, and that's like helped his game out. Um, Not someone I was super high on, say a year ago, but I like what I've seen this year. Um, Serge Ngoma has been quite frankly electric when he's got to play for Red Bulls. Unfortunately, he can't seem to stay healthy. But he's another one who kind of was like decent prospect last year, but just has kind of developed at an incredible rate, and looks like, probably a top 2005 prospect, and excited to see more of him. Hopefully he can string together some health consistency. And then another player I'm super high on that I kind of talk about a lot that hasn't got a ton of opportunity at DC is Ted Di Pietro, another late bloomer. And that's kind of like, again, drives home at like you just gotta keep an eye on these kids for a long time because you just never know. Uh,
I
but
heard a ton of noise about him through Loudon last season. Like people were really upset he wasn't getting play at DC. I don't think DC honestly has done a very good job of playing the youth. I think they've had a lot of really good young talent. But I'm very curious about him as he continues to develop and what Rooney does there.
yeah, I mean, I sort of, yeah, discovered him at Loudon. Um, was kind of one of those situations where you start watching film and you're just like eyes get bigger and you're like, where the hell has this guy been?
Yeah,
And how did I not know about him? And then he got a homegrown deal late. He got it as a 20-year-old, I think, which is pretty late
yeah.
by homegrown standards now. And so he was really high on my like predicted 25 to start, and he hasn't played a ton. He got a start, I think, 2 weeks ago, and he did okay. Um, but yeah, I mean, the talent is there. He's super creative. He's very technical. So I think it's a matter of time before he just like gets a run of starts and opens people's eyes. But we'll see, with Rooney there, like what he rates, how he rates him. I don't know what he trains like. A lot of times with these really talented players that aren't playing, maybe it's something they're seeing in training that we
Sure.
obviously aren't privy to. But yeah, how DC leverages their wealth of talent in their area is always, I think, been a little bit questionable.
Curious your thoughts or if you have any insights. Another name, immense talent, not getting a lot of run. Kaden Clark, fantastic potential. He had the appendix. He had some got COVID. Had some issues last year. Any thoughts or insights on him or.
Yeah, I've gotten into some conversations. I'll call it a conversation. Some arguments maybe with Red Bull fans about him. I'm a huge believer in his talent. I still think he's definitely one of the most talented players in the 2003 class and on that U20 team. Yeah, he just seems to have had some kind of crappy luck in terms of like he finds that great form and then something happens.
Yeah.
That happened last year with the appendectomy. He started to show that level again at the end of the year when Red Bulls were making that playoff push. He was playing really well. I thought he started off the season nicely, and then he got injured at a U20 camp, and that kind of set him back. So
Yeah.
this might just be a situation where like a change of scenery would be best for everybody.
Yeah.
And I know there's been talks of that. It's been the rumor mill's been pretty slow, so I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, he's not playing a ton. And I sort of understand why he hasn't been super impactful. I think for him, he's really got to figure out how he can get on the ball and influence the game more. He can sort of disappear.
Yeah.
But his talent is still super high, and Leipzig signed him for a reason. And I do think maybe like a move to Belgium or the Netherlands or something like that might be a nice next step for him to just get a fresh start.
Yeah, I wonder, I thought Salzburg would be a very natural maybe step up, but not necessarily, huge challenge. They had sold a bunch of guys, not just, Aronson, but others, they kind of cleared out. And I
Yeah,
wondered if they were making room to bring a couple of those Red Bulls over, Tolkien and maybe
yeah,
Clark and Fish there. I'll be curious to see how that goes.
yeah, yeah. That would be an obvious one. But yeah, I think something like that would be good for him.
Who has made the biggest strides so far, this season in MLS or maybe even over the last month? Like who are some people that are popping up on your radar that kind of surprised you or have been, maybe screaming up the list that, initially you were like, I don't think they'll get a chance or not sure about them. And all of a sudden they've caught your attention, the saucer eyes, as you said.
Yeah. I mentioned a few, but I think I didn't. I think Caleb Wiley's playing a lot by circumstance, but I think he would have had a role either way, whether Gutman was hurt or not. But he's opened my eyes because there's just a lot more to his offensive game than I thought. Uh, he's just provides a bit more in like one-on-one attack and crossing, and so I've been impressed with him. And uh, yeah, so he's further along than I would have thought, and I think is a top 2004. And I mentioned Caden Pierre wasn't really on my radar at all as like a legitimate youth national team player. But if you watch the last 3 or 4 of his games with KC, you could just see he's stronger, and that's showing up in duels and defensively and kind of being able to maintain ball control through contact. um, I think he's always had pace. I think he's always been a pretty good crosser, so that's just helped him, I think, round out his game. And I think right now if I had to choose a starting right back for a U20 team, I think I'd go with Pierre. And then we talked about Serge for the Red Bulls. Huge progress
Yeah.
from last year to this year. He's just really playing really confidently. He comes in and he's in attack mode. He's got a couple goals. So yeah, he's a super exciting 2005 when I think we're working on our like top 20 list for each age group. He might push himself to the top of that age group.
Okay, yeah, giving a little preview of what might
Yeah.
become. Walk us from front or back to front. From if you were to put your best 11, by position, not necessarily ranked. Walk us from keeper up to striker. Who's our best 11 in this age group in MLS?
Yeah, so the criteria is under 21, so born in 2001 or after, US eligible, and playing in the MLS or on an MLS team.
Yeah,
So that was the criteria I used. Okay, so I'd definitely start Gaga in goal. I think my center backs would be George Campbell, who's really the only center back, under 21 center back playing consistently right now.
yeah.
Plays for Atlanta.
Hoping
Uh,
Brendan Craig cracks that group.
yeah, I'm hoping Jalen Neal or Brandon Craig
Yeah.
cracks that group pretty soon. I have Neal over Craig, but I rate them really equally. Um, so Campbell and Neal, Jalen Neal are my starting center backs. I got John Tolkien playing left back. I got Nathan Harriel playing right back, who won that right back job with a really good Philadelphia team. And he's not a flashy fullback. He's defensive minded, but he does the little things to help your team win. So I have him at right back. My midfield, Obed Vargas had a really nice start to the season. He's been hurt. I'm a fan. So I have him playing the six. He's kind of a 6 or 8. Jack McGlynn and Cudi Pietro. I'm realizing now that's a very defensively weak team. So we might have trouble. We might have trouble controlling the midfield with those three in midfield. But yeah, if we have the ball, we're going to be dangerous.
I was gonna say fun to watch team though.
Yeah, we're going to create a lot of chances, but we might give up a lot of chances. And then my wings are going to be Cade Cowell and Brian Gutierrez. And Cade Cowell's for San Jose, if you don't know. And then my striker is a guy that had a great CONCACAF championship tournament that did not play for the U.S., but he is U.S. eligible. His name's Kimi Ordonez. He plays for Cincinnati. He's Guatemalan American. He played for Guatemala.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that's because he wasn't, I don't think he was invited to a camp leading up. I think he's a really good player, and
I'd expect an invite in the future to some camps.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Unfortunately, he's kind of because he played in that
Oh, right.
tournament. He's not eligible for any sort of U20 level. So for a lot of those guys, right, like Leone and
Yeah.
guys who played for Mexico or even there's an '06 that I love that played for Haiti. His name's Brian Destin. He's in the Inter Miami Academy, and he played, what, 3 years up. So he'd be eligible for the next U20 cycle, but
Can't play
not
for
for
him.
us because he played for Haiti.
What do you think of Cal? I've heard a lot of mixed feelings on him from the Twitterverse. I'm curious your take on him.
Yeah, he's hard. He's difficult to scout because the physical tools are so exciting. Um, but technically, tactically, it's just the development curve hasn't been going in the direction, as fast up as you would hope. And who knows why that is. The thing is, I've seen it with San Jose. I've seen some signs of technical growth in terms of like
Sure.
ball manipulation and passing, but he really struggled in that U20 tournament. And I just wonder if he was trying to do too much. If he felt like, he's really above the level and so he was just kind of pressing a bit, but he was struggling to beat players he should not struggle with beating one-on-one. Yet I see him do it at times in MLS. So he's one I've been kind of wondering if like, and nothing against San Jose, but maybe he just needs a change of scenery as well. Like maybe he's not getting the the guidance he needs to develop there, and moving abroad would be good for him to just challenge himself in a different way. I don't know. That's
Yeah, I've heard a little rumblings that you think he's a potential European interest.
Yeah, I mean, the the thing we hear a lot about European clubs and what they initially get fascinated by with US players is it's usually the players that aren't like your obvious like, blue chip prospects like a Gio Reyna, for example.
Right.
But the players like Cal who have these like really, really intriguing physical tools, like a Justin Shea, um, clubs abroad, they get excited about that because they don't have a ton of players like that. They got a ton of like undersized technical players. They're
Yeah.
all over Europe. They're everywhere, but they don't have Cade Cowles running around. And so I think there's that arrogance of I can not fix him, but I can develop him. Like this is a block of clay I can mold into a really great player. You hear that a lot with American football with like quarterbacks, right? With
Yeah.
like coaches who are like, I can take these tools and make them great. I think that's kind of what happens in Europe where um someone like Cade Cowell, they're like, yeah, I can work with this. This is a foundation I can work with. So he had interest from Everton, I believe, earlier in the window, and then it was reported that Reams, I'm probably saying that wrong,
Yeah.
100% saying that wrong. Um, but where Kobe Henry went to the reserve team and where Balogun just went from Arsenal, San Jose turned down a bid for Cal there, they're turning into a great development club. So I think that tells you about what they think of him. So yeah, I think there's definitely interest in him and the type of player he is.
Yeah, I mean, him, you mentioned Gaga, Caden, who are some other names that you think are legit, probably, prospects for January to get a bite from Europe?
Yeah, I'd say yeah, we talked about, I mean, Gaga's already gone.
Yeah.
I think Tolkien will get looked at. I think the Red Bull system in general thinks highly of Tolkien. I've heard Salzburg thinks pretty highly of him. I do think they signed a left back fairly recently, so maybe there's not a place for him. I think Jack McGlynn's game is tailor made for, La Liga or Serie A.
Yeah.
I think so. I cannot. I would have to think that he's going to be. I think all the Philly kids are getting
I
pretty
was gonna
heavily
say I'd be
scouted,
shocked if
but
Paxson is in a MLS next year. I mean, he has the pedigree. He had a great tournament. His brother's success. Like I would be shocked if somebody didn't bite for the name
yeah,
alone. But I think he backs it up with the talent too.
yeah. So I think he and McGlynn are ready or about ready for that. The only other name I'd throw out there that isn't really getting talked about, but I think um has I would imagine is on radars of clubs is Brian Gutierrez in Chicago. I think his development curve's really exciting. He's just really, really grown in every way the last couple of years. I really like his fearlessness as well. He's kind of got that same aggressive try things mentality, and so he'd be another one I think is probably, if not January, maybe another solid half a season away.
Sure. And obviously it's a World Cup year, there's very little opportunity, even if there was anybody. But just curious, is there anybody biting at the heels of last couple spots on Greg's US team? Do you think anybody on this list has even a shot, outside shot?
I'd say the only person I'd give any legitimate shot to is John Tolkien,
Yeah.
only because there really isn't a clear second left back. And Greg's mentioned him as being close, I think, in the last set of interviews in the last camp. So usually when Greg mentions somebody, it's because he is, thinking about them
Yeah.
pretty considerably. So who knows? Yeah, Tolkien might get an invite in September. I think I think it's possible, but probably not likely. I'd say anyone else on this list, I'd say would be a complete surprise to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe like Jogo or somebody over in Europe or something, might have an outside shot, but I don't think anybody currently on this list in MLS is really scratching enough, to because Greg tends to stick with his guys, for the most part.
Yeah, especially this late in the game. I'd say the only other MLS player that would be on my radar to kind of sneak in is Georgie, but he's obviously not a under 21.
Right, right. Yeah, man. So before wrapping up, just curious, what games are you looking forward to this weekend? Whether MLS or otherwise, for the U.S. national team. Just curious, what's on your radar?
Yeah, so during the European season, I usually focus on, especially earlier in the year, on players that are in new situations or I think might be on the cusp of breaking out. So usually focusing on younger players in Europe. So literally a match that just kicked off
Yeah,
is Club Bruges, and Owen Odazawi is starting, which is a big deal because he was not even playing football for Club Bruges last season, even though
yeah. He
he
was
got
working on his
signed.
modeling career, right? He had switched gears.
Yeah, he was working on things that were not related to soccer, and the and Club Bruges sold one of their starting center backs, the guy who's in front of Owen, earlier this week, so kind of indicated that he might get a chance, and he's starting. So it's a huge opportunity for him. So I'm really excited to watch him play. Um, Premier League kicks off, so we got Crystal Palace and Arsenal in about 15 minutes. Neither of our boys are starting, which I don't think is a huge surprise. Richards is there was wind that Crystal Palace might move to a three center back formation, but I never that never quite made sense to me. So they're in the back line of four, and Richards is on the bench, so he's gonna have to fight for minutes. But that's still a game. And Turner's the number two, so that's a game I think a lot of people are going to tune into. I certainly will. I'm probably going to watch Owen play, to be honest, and then catch clips of Crystal Palace Arsenal. I'm excited to watch PFOC at Union Berlin. They play Hertha. So nice Berlin battle. Round one. I'm excited to see him play at a higher level.
Yeah, I thought a lot of people maybe over got excited about the friendly, but also others that undersold it. Like I thought he played excellently. I watched it. I thought his press was excellent. The goal was nice. Just a striker's goal in my opinion. Just being ready when you're called upon,
Yeah,
and putting
that's
it
his game.
away. Yeah. So to me, I'm very, very excited and intrigued to watch him at the regular week in, week out level at a higher level and see if he can put it all together.
Yeah, he seems the most ready to contribute in a top five league right now. I mean, he's in kind of a lot of our strikers are very young. He's in more of the prime of his career. So I'm just interesting to see if he can do it at that level. That's it's cool to see players kind of succeed at a level, go to a higher one, and then see if they can do it and just kind of keep pushing that. Um, Leeds plays Wolves. I think we're all gonna be tuned into Leeds all year. So we got Jesse, we got Brendan, we got Tyler, and we're all Leeds fans.
That's it.
So yeah, it's definitely gonna watch that one. I'm excited to see Taylor Booth play for Utrecht. He's finally getting his chance. He's wearing the number 10 jersey. He's getting his chance for a senior team. I think he's a talented player. So I'm excited to watch him, his first meaningful game with them. Um, I think I've heard PSV is going to rotate pretty heavily this weekend, so we might see a good run out of Richie Ledesma with them, which would be
Yeah.
awesome. I think he's got a big decision on his hands whether to stay or go on loan. I think Bells at Scuffs reported that it's kind of up to him to make that call. So we'll see. But from the looks of it, in the big games, I don't know that he's going to have a big role. But these types of games where they rotate between Champions League qualifiers, like he has a really big chance to make an impression. So I'm excited to see that. And then I'm really intrigued to see what kind of a role Alex Alvarado has at Vizela. There's also a word that he might be competing for a starting position, and you know, he's he's a 2003 and to be playing in the top tier of Portugal would be pretty incredible. So I'm excited to see what role he ends up having for them early on, and of course to see Alex Mendez play with him. And then lastly, I'm really excited about the Rangers guys. I think
Yeah.
Malik looks really good, um, and he's clearly made a good impression in 2 weeks. And I think he's going to be a key player for them, even though they haven't looked super good. I think he's been a bright spot. And then James Sands looks like a different player to me too. I know he had a couple rough moments
Yeah.
in the Champions League qualifier, but he's bigger, stronger, looks a little quicker. Still a super smart player. He also made like two or three potentially goal saving plays in that game. So I thought it was a very mixed performance from him, but there were some really high highs and a couple low lows. But I'm excited to watch those two guys develop at Rangers. So those are the games I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
Awesome. All right. So you guys get your recording set up and you got a full weekend.
Yeah,
of games to watch. Marcus, man, it was fun getting to chat with you, and hopefully you guys follow him on Twitter. I'll drop his handle in, and keep an eye at Chasing the Cup, and he's gonna be dropping a lot of youth content coming up. So we'll probably be getting together here in a couple weeks and talking about some more.
for sure. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, man.